So we start walking down this giant driveway, and the entire time we're just getting the heebie-jeebies. And me and the buddy that saw it end up talking about it, and it's just like, man, did you see that thing? Like, that thing was huge. And my buddy's mom ends up calling him. And she's just like, hey, I think someone just shot a shotgun right outside my window. Did y'all hear that? Looking back on it now, I think maybe whatever we saw could have walked past the cabin and slapped the side of it. My buddy that saw it with me is about 6'4" to paint the picture, a big basketball looking guy. And we end up making him stand right there, and this thing had him beat, man.
This is Bigfoot Crossroads. My name's Matt, and joining me is Ethan. Ethan is someone I've talked to in the past about some ghostly stuff, and he recently reached back out with a story that I believe you might find interesting. Ethan, thanks for joining me, man.
Yes, Matt. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Take us through the story of what happened and everything, just like you did in the email. And we'll go from there.
All right, absolutely. So I'm from Eastern Tennessee, go to a college up in East Tennessee. And so we decided around February of 2024 that my buddies was going to be having his 21st birthday party. So a group of us decided to rent out a cabin. It was me, the buddy that was turning 21, and then two of our other friends. And then the buddy that was turning 21, his mother, and his cousin and the cousin's husband. So the cabin that we decided to rent out was in between the Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg area of Eastern Tennessee, up near the Great Smoky Mountains. Driving up there, me and my buddy went up a day late on a Friday. We had prior knowledge that they were going to be up there on Thursday, but with schoolwork and everything, we decided to go a little bit earlier or a little bit later than they were. When we ended up driving up there, me and my buddy were kind of joking around because we were probably going to be about 6 miles from the main road, and we were just joking about, man, what if we see Bigfoot or something like that, just kind of joking around about everything. And so just to paint the picture, we pull up to this cabin, and the cabin, the driveway is probably about 2 to 3 football fields length, big driveway, kind of a steep incline to the driveway, to the main cabin. There was only 2 other properties that were right beside us. One was kind of a little bit more rundown house at the bottom of the hill. Even pulling in the first time, we could see how on edge they were. Just anytime we would go past their house, they would just look out the blinds and stuff like that. And then there ended up being another cabin right beside us up on that hill. I'd say probably about 50 to 100 feet away from us.
The kind of the rundown place, are those like locals that live there?
I believe so, yes. They we know that there was at least 3 people staying there, a older gentleman and what I presume would be his wife, and a younger child, maybe a granddaughter or just a younger kid. But yeah, I would say they were more than likely locals because you could tell they had been there for a while.
And then these cabins are just normal rental cabins in the mountains?
Yeah, pretty much. The layout of the cabin that we were staying at was a 3-story cabin. The bottom of the cabin had a full half wraparound porch. So the woods were to the left of the cabin. There was a retaining wall that you could actually walk up to get to the 2nd-story balcony. That 2nd-story balcony actually had a jacuzzi on it that kind of blocked the path from the woods, almost in case somebody was going to loot or break in there. And then once you got inside the cabin, there was another stairway entrance that would get you to like a semi-room that you could go up into, and that's where we ended up staying while we were there. So when we first got to that cabin, we kind of just took account of the layout and everything. It was a really nice cabin, and so we were figuring out who was going to stay where. My friend that was having his birthday. His mother ended up staying on that first floor with his cousin, and the husband staying on the second floor, with the four of us staying with each other on the very top. The first night that we were there, we noticed that it was really quiet. We were shooting paintball guns and just kind of joking around and everything, just doing what normal college kids do when they're out in the woods. That first night, Matt, I don't think I ended up telling you this, but I ended up calling one of my buddies to just talk about the story again. And that first night, it was really quiet. Actually, one of our car alarms decided to go off unexpectedly.
Really?
Yeah. We had 3 total cars there. The way the driveway was, it would take you right up to the bottom of the cabin. And on the right side of this driveway, if you're looking at the cabin, was this kind of like walk around cliff. It was just a straight drop off, but there was probably a 2 to 3 foot pathway right there. That'll be important later, but we did notice that because we did walk around it that first day. But yeah, that first night, one of the alarms went off that we couldn't explain. We thought maybe the neighbors came up and messed with it or something, but we just figured no one's going to walk up 2 to 3 football field lengths to come up to the car and try to get into a car.
Right.
So then mainly the encounter happens on the next night. We explored around in the woods throughout the day, kind of just going about our day and everything. And there was some basketball on, and we were watching basketball, and it started to get dark. And we had made the plan earlier in the day that we were bored, and we were mainly just going to go out and walk the 6 miles on the main road just to get back and see if we could walk either Pigeon Forge or Gatlinburg, just because we were so bored. And during then, I'm not very much of a scaredy cat chicken guy, but one of the guys that was walking with me was kind of afraid of bears and everything. And even though it was February, I mean, you might have 1 or 2 bears out, but with hibernation and everything going on. And so we decided, okay, let's gear up. Let's go get in his car. And to paint the picture, his car was on the far right of this driveway. And so we're digging around in this car, and I always carry a pocket knife. I don't know what much it would do if we ran into a bear or anything like that. And we didn't have any flashlights. I think that's probably pretty stupid that we were going to go walk around without any flashlights, but we decided to, we'll go on. And so we ended up having my pocket knife, and one of them had a book bag with just some chargers and stuff if we ended up making it all the way there and we needed to charge phones or something. So we start walking down this giant driveway, and the entire time we're just getting the heebie-jeebies, man. I mean, we all feel like, oh, what if there is a bear? So the 2 of them end up chickening out, and so we end up turning around. And
what time was it?
It was probably, I would say, around 11:30. I don't think it was 12 o'clock yet, because we didn't really have a curfew, but we decided it would probably take us about an hour to walk this, probably a little bit over an hour to walk this 6 miles. It was a windy road, so we could cut down this, we could cut through the woods and stuff if we had to make up time to get to this road. But I would say it's probably about 11:30 if I had to guess.
Okay.
It was dark enough without being the dead of the night. And so we journey off, and we're going down the driveway, and 2 of them are just like, I don't feel right, man. Like, there might be bears. Let's turn around. So like I don't know if you hear my voice changing, but just talking about it, like my palms are already sweating. We go and we turn around and we start walking up the driveway, and we get about, I'd say probably about 100 feet away from the car that we were just digging around in. And my buddy, I see him staring up to the right of this car. And so I start staring up the right of the car with him, and we start looking, and we just see this giant black mass. Like, that's the only way I can describe it. I didn't see eyes shine. I didn't see anything. It was just this big black mass. And so while we're looking at it, I don't remember if it was me or if it was him. We go to get our phone out of our pocket so that we can like get the phone flashlight. I don't know what much it would have done if we got it out. And so we both take our eyes off of this mass, and when we look back up, it's just gone. Well, when it's gone, like I said, it was kind of close to this rocky cliff area where the driveway was cracked. That was a walkway. and we hear these rocks start falling down the hill, like something's just stirred the rocks and kicked them down. And so we take off to the left of the car, and we end up going up the retaining wall to just try to get up there as fast as we can. And all three of us are sprawling, trying to climb over this railing and slide across that jacuzzi that was mentioned earlier. And we bust into the door, and the buddy that stayed back, that was having the 21st birthday, we just flip him out, man. And he was just like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And we try to tell him, like, there's something out there, like this thing was up here, and he doesn't believe us or anything like that. And so we end up calming down a little bit, and me and the buddy that saw it end up talking about it. And it's just like, man, did you see that thing? Like, what was that? That thing was huge. Like, did you see a big black mass? And it's like, yeah, we're saying the exact same details, and really just kind of digging into like what we saw. So after we tell everybody like what we saw, because it was just the four of us awake at that time, we are just kind of laying around sitting there, and my buddy's mom ends up calling him. And she's just like, "Hey, I think someone just shot a shotgun right outside my window. Did y'all hear that?" We're like, "No, are you okay? What's going on?" So we go down to the second floor, and we talk to the cousin's husband, and we're like, "Hey, like something's going on. Like we saw something outside. Like she thinks a shotgun just went off." And so I want to say he had a little small 9mm pistol, and he went outside and kind of just looked off the porch and didn't really see much. But basically, I don't know if it was a shotgun, or looking back on it now, I think maybe whatever we saw could have walked past the cabin and slapped the side of it. I don't know if that's something that would even remotely happen. But after that night, we all woke up. We were still pretty shooken up, and we went outside, and we kind of looked out at that little area that we saw this thing at. And my buddy that saw it with me is about 6'4", to paint the picture, a big basketball looking guy. And we end up making him stand right there, and this thing had him beat, man. I'm saying probably 8 to 12 inches taller than him. And
Wow.
the size of if it was the shoulders, the size of the shoulders were just massive, like 3 feet wide. Just like he didn't even compare to it. And so I'm a bigger guy. I used to play college football when I was younger, my freshman year, and I've got a pretty big foot. And so I wear a size 13, and we end up looking around more on that little cliff region, and we find this. I don't know if you've ever like watched pro sports, mainly the NFL, when they go to cut and they like kind of dig their side of their foot into the ground.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we found this. It looked like almost like a slide, like a partial slide print, and I compared my shoe to it, and this thing was probably 17 to 18 inches wide, or not wide, but long.
Wow.
So we were pretty flipped out. I know we didn't talk about it the entire car ride back, but I was just questioning what I saw and everything along those lines. So I kind of went online and started looking stuff up, and I ran across this page called I think it was the Bigfoot Mapping Project.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard about that before.
Sure. Yeah.
But there was actually a sighting right over the hill from where we presume this thing, what it came from, that there was a sighting in '08. If it happened to be the same thing we saw, I don't know. But I ended up finding that, and I found that really interesting. And I know that I looked the other day, and there was another report from July, and where we were in there in February. I mean, that's pretty close. But it looks like a few miles closer to Gatlinburg, there is just like a bunch of sightings. I want to say there was 4 to 5, just in this small little region close enough to us that if it did make it, if it was Bigfoot, I'm not saying it was, I don't know what I saw, but if it was, I mean, it's right there in that region. And looking back on that night, I'm not entirely sure that she heard a shotgun, or if something slapped the side of the cabin. I'm kind of on here to see if you have any input, and see if I can get anybody listening to has a similar encounter as me.
Yeah, man. I mean, first off, that region that you're talking about is a hotbed. I mean, there's a lot of sightings that come out of there. I think that's kind of why they started the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot convention festival,
Yeah.
which is extremely popular. I was just, as a matter of fact, on the past episode I just did, the guest was from Tennessee, originally from California, and his encounter happened in California, but we were talking about Tennessee. And I mentioned this episode that was coming up, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of history with that area in general. I mean, I know you had the comparison with your friend, but I'm trying to picture it in my head. Was this like, what kind of car was it? And where did the top of the car come up to it whenever it was standing next to it?
So the type of car, I want to say it was a Nissan Altima.
Okay.
Pretty newer model. I would say that the car itself, the way the driveway was made, the driveway probably would have the car up about 2 to 3 feet. It wasn't a big drastic change, but it was noticeable when you were on the path.
Mm-hmm.
And the roof of the car probably went to, I would say, right under where your chest starts. So like right under where your sternum starts. This thing was probably towering right over right there.
Oh, wow. Okay. And it was on the path, you said, by the driveway, where the driveway was cracked or whatever?
Yeah. So the way the driveway was, you could kind of like walk down on this path, and it was standing pretty much right on the most open part of this path. And I kind of think maybe when we took off, this thing was going to watch us from right there. And maybe, I know I've listened to your podcast in the past, just kind of loosely, and I've heard people how they've been kind of like paralleled by these things. I don't know if we were going to get paralleled or what, but I think when we went to turn back around and go back towards the house or the cabin, I think this thing was like, if I don't move, maybe they won't see me, because it was a really dark night. I don't want to say entirely that there wasn't a whole lot of light, but I remember it was extremely dark because when we set off and didn't have flashlights, that was kind of one of our main concerns. But I think maybe this thing was kind of just hunkering down when we decided to turn around really quickly.
Any lights on the cabin, like outdoor lights or anything?
So we would turn them off. With those people below us, it was kind of like a crack house, like not to offend anyone or anything, but just kind of sketchy people. And so, like I said, the cousin's husband that was on the second floor was armed with a pistol. And I think your eyes adjust better when it's dark inside and outside. So we tended to keep the lights off. The bottom of the cabin had a single light on in the kitchen, but it was around the corner, so you had a little bit of light shine, but for the most part, it was almost pitch black.
And you mentioned whenever you guys took your eyes off of it and looked back, it was gone.
Yeah.
What are the escape routes possible in that position? Where do you think it went?
So the trail went around the entirety of the cabin. So it went around the right side to the back of the cabin and back towards the woods. One thing I found interesting that I left out is when we got back into the house right after we heard whatever that sound was that his mom heard. There was people that ended up renting that cabin on a Saturday. So they came about a day later than we checked in, and I want to say they had 2 golden retrievers, because we were messing around with them and like talking to them off the porch the night they got there. And those dogs just went crazy, and they were barking and howling until about 3 o'clock that night. And if that thing took off that way, then it would have ran right past that cabin also. Another detail that I left out, and I know that we talked about it in the email, we ended up going into town that Friday night. This encounter happened on a Saturday. We ended up going to this gift store, and they were selling what they marketed as a Bigfoot whistle, and it was a Bigfoot head, and it was a whistle you could blow into. And looking back at it, it sounded more like a injured rabbit call. And we were messing with that thing the entire time we were there up into the encounter that we had.
I mean, you guys were kind of in a stereotypical Bigfoot situation.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest. I mean, of course, we can only assume that that's what that was. I don't know what else would be that size and standing in an upright position, and behaving that way.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you were saying, hibernation time for bears, but in that area, you're talking about, little Tennessee black bears. They don't get that big by any means.
Yeah, they're nowhere that size at all.
The paintball stuff, I find interesting. The Bigfoot whistle, which, I think I have one that I got years ago. I'm sure people can pick those up on the internet. They'll probably become the latest craze in trying to lure in a Bigfoot. But
yeah,
just, these things tend to like to hang around places like cabins and campgrounds and things like that and do people watching. And that's probably what was going on in this situation.
Yeah, and when we ended up leaving, and I think most of them thought we were crazy other than me and the other person that had this sighting, we were actually told by the mom that the cabin owner told us that no matter what circumstances, we were not allowed to leave any trash outside, which I found kind of odd because it was the middle of February and everything along those lines. And the trash cans were actually really close to this path. They were right by the porch. But we didn't throw any trash away up there. I don't know if something was trying to look into the trash and we just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But I thought it was kind of odd that we weren't allowed to put any trash. Like we couldn't even have trash on the porch. Because for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, if they were just paranoid about bear or if they knew something that we didn't know.
I mean, did they say bears get in the trash there?
They just, so basically the way the cabin was rented, it was like kind of Airbnb style. So like you didn't like directly text them or anything. But basically they just said no trash at all in those outside trash. They didn't really give a reason why. I think before we had this whole ordeal, we thought, okay, it's a bear. And I mean, we're stupid college kids. We didn't know when bears were out and all that stuff. And it took me looking it up to find out, hey, I don't think that was a bear.
I'm just thinking from, a vantage point of like, if I owned a cabin that I rented out to people and there were nuisance bears, I would put that in the wording to let people know, like, hey, don't leave trash out because there's a bear problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of weird that they didn't specify bears, but they had a problem with the trash being left out. And again, that's kind of a known thing about Bigfoot is they're very opportunistic, and, people renting out these cabins and then throwing away a bunch of trash and leaving. I could definitely see if there was Bigfoot in the area, why they would come and check out those trash cans.
Yeah, and it was rule enough that if it wanted to, it'd be in and out without anyone knowing. Because I mean, the way the trash cans were placed was out of sight, out of mind, kind of. Basically away from the cabin, but close enough to the cabin that you didn't have to walk far.
Another thing I find kind of interesting, and I'm not trying to push anything by any means, but I'm sure you've heard before, if you've listened to any amount of Bigfoot podcasts or read Bigfoot reports at all, that sometimes people have this sort of anxiety, this feeling of dread, whenever a Bigfoot's in the area. And you mentioned your buddies wanting to turn around and getting kind of shook during the walk into town.
Yeah.
Do you think that was just normal fear because it was dark and they're in the woods? Or do you think maybe that had something to do with the Bigfoot being close by?
Well, Matt, to be honest, I don't know, because once we turned around and started walking closer to the house or the cabin, I started feeling the same thing they were. But I know that we've talked about ghost stories in the past. I mean, I got the same feeling from those experiences also. Just deep down, something's watching me. Something's not right. I need to get out of this situation.
How long was it whenever you turned around before you noticed this thing standing there?
I want to say we made it a little over halfway down the driveway. We probably saw it within a minute and a half to 2 minutes, because this hill was steep. We weren't trying to go up fast, but just fast enough to get home. I'd say we saw it within 2 to 3 minutes.
Were you walking uphill?
Yeah, uphill back towards the cabin. And when we finally like realized something was there, we were probably on the most level part where it started to round off to be level where the cars were parked. And we saw it for, I want to say probably, it felt like forever, but more than likely 45 seconds to a minute.
Do you happen to remember from that position where it would have been at? Did it have a clear line of sight of you guys as you were walking down the road?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That little walkway kind of jarred over to that little steep incline. Um, it would have definitely been able to, you could see straight onto the road. So if it would have stayed there while we were walking, it would have watched us the entire way down the driveway and probably about a mile down the road.
And there wouldn't have been any reason for you guys to walk that direction if you came back.
No, the door to the cabin was directly facing the driveway. This little area went down, kind of jarred down a little bit and came back up. It was almost like a U shape, like if you can envision a U shape, a gradual like decline and back up, like probably 1 foot decline. But there was a fence on right beside that path. And it looks like just over time, like where either people have walked there, or animals, or whatever this thing was. But no, there was no reason we would have walked past it on the way back.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment that it was probably watching you guys, and just by chance you guys happened to see it. You know, if you hadn't been paying attention, you would have probably walked right past it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what happens in a lot of cases. I think they're used to people not noticing them whenever they're standing right there.
Have you ever, I'll just ask, have you ever heard anything of them slapping cabins after being seen, or just kind of like playing around? Because I don't think, we didn't hear it on the third floor, but according to what she was saying, it was the loudest thing she's heard ever.
So this is all just speculation. I don't know why they slap the sides of cabins and houses and stuff, but I know myself and a lot of people I've talked to kind of believe that they do it to see what our reaction is going to be. And the fact that it kind of knew that it had been busted, that it had been spotted, and then you guys went inside the cabin, it might have done it to see if you would look out the windows or come back outside to check on it, which ultimately, you know, the one guy with the pistol did go outside. So that might be a reason why it would have done it. I'm trying to remember if I've ever heard of a situation where it happened right after being seen like that.
Yeah.
And I honestly can't remember. I've heard a lot of cases of them slapping the sides of houses, though.
Okay.
And it might have been something else. It might have been a tree knock or a rock clack, or
Yeah.
maybe it was a shotgun. You know, who knows?
Yeah.
But it with the rest of everything that you experienced, it's definitely worth mentioning that, you know, she heard that sound.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It could have very well been something slapping the side of the cabin, like I said, just to see what you guys would do.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to maybe talk to those other people that had the dogs.
Yeah.
And find out what they experienced, because they probably got messed with too.
Yeah. And when we ended up leaving, it was early in the morning the next day on a Sunday. So we weren't going to go disturb them. But yeah, I wish I would have went over there after kind of recouping myself and thinking everything out logistically.
And then hearing the rock slide whenever this thing departed, and then finding that, you know, partial slide track or what looked like one. I mean, all the context clues add up, man, to this being a Bigfoot encounter.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little crazy to think about and everything, because I mean, I grew up on stories like that and everything, but I never really was 100% like, yeah, I believe this 100% true. But after that night, I don't know, just talking about it and everything, my hands are clammy. I got the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, and it's just crazy to think about that. Maybe it really was a Bigfoot that I saw out there in the woods.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I think they're more common than people realize. I still think they're rare, but I think the lack of sightings is more on our end and not because of lack of numbers on their part.
Absolutely. And I mean, just looking at that online database platform, like they're up there, like people aren't seeing them because they're so engaged in what they're doing. And I mean, being on smartphones and stuff and not really in tune with everything. Cause I mean, we weren't on phones. I mean, if we were walking up the driveway on our phones, I don't think anyone would have saw it.
Right. And if you guys had flashlights and didn't point the flashlights at it, you probably wouldn't have seen it.
Yeah.
Just the way our eyes focus on light and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you want to talk about the ghost stuff?
I will. It depends how many stories you want to hear, because I've got at least 4. I've got 2 really good ones that I think you would mainly be interested in, those 2.
Well, let's hear them, man. You know me. I like a good ghost story.
Well, I'll dig in then. So my mother lived in this house when she was younger. And I want to say this was probably the mid-'80s when this happened. So one night she's staying at home, and she's young enough to have to be babysat, and she's with her older sister. And they're sitting in the living room. And the way the living room is, the back wall behind them is the stairs that go down to the basement. And so they hear what sounds like someone starting to walk up these steps. And so instantly her older sister hops up, runs to the door, and locks the door. Well, these footsteps start getting louder and louder as whatever this is comes up the stairs. And the door handle starts shaking violently, not like a normal person just trying to try the door handle, like starts shaking. So they end up calling law enforcement, and my dad's in law enforcement, and he's heard this phone call before and has listened to it multiple times, but they say someone's in the house. So both of them run out the front door and end up running down the street to her uncle's house. And by the time law enforcement gets there and goes to clear the house, the downstairs basement was fully finished with a long hallway with a bunch of doors. And then the door at the end of the hallway led to the outermost part of the house, so out of the house. When they go down to clear it, all the picture frames had been taken off the wall, and every single door was open. Another law enforcement officer was outside and went to go clear that second door, and had discovered that the door was blocked by a bunch of trash cans and stuff. So if someone was in, they wouldn't have been able to get out. So just knowing that, it kind of branches into like a sub part of the story. When I was first born and came to that house, my mom would say pictures would fly off the wall, but I want to say it was the second week of me being alive and staying at that house as a baby that my parents were in the bed, and the TV kicks on, just like that staticky, the traditional ghost story. The TV turns on all staticky.
They're here.
Yes, absolutely. And they go and they're like, oh, we just rolled over the remote. My dad ends up getting out of the bed and walking over to the television, and the remote is placed on top of the television facing away from the TV. And he tried pressing the button to turn it off, and the way it was pointed, it wouldn't have even been able to send a signal to the television. So they thought that was weird. Obviously, that's a story that was passed down to me. This next story still gives me the heebie-jeebies and everything. So this is my first ever encounter by myself. So we'll jump into that one now, I guess. So I am a transfer student at the current university that I'm at. I was at another university playing college football. And basically, I don't mind saying where it is. It's Maryville College. It's a really old, about 200-year-old institution. So there's a lot of ghost stories going on there. This night, I just happened to stay back while a bunch of my teammates decided to go into town, and about 30 minutes away to a town that had a lot more bars and everything. And I had been up late the night before and just had decided to kind of take it easy. And this was on a Friday night, if I remember correctly. I ended up waking out of a dead sleep, just cold chills, sweating and everything. And I I fell asleep with the lights on. Well, people that know me, I cannot sleep with any lights on. Like it's pitch black in my room when I fall asleep. So I thought that was a little weird because I wasn't tired enough to fall asleep with every single light on. I end up walking out of my room to go to the bathroom. And when I'm in the bathroom, I just have a feeling that something's behind me. So, like, I look behind me both ways over both my shoulders, and there's nothing there. And I have severe migraines. So, like, that's a real big kicker for me. And it tends to happen a lot when I have experiences like ghost stories and this encounter I had. I tend to get a really bad migraine in the middle of it. So I end up starting to get this super severe migraine to like the point that I can't even see. And I end up taking back off to my room from the bathroom. And I shut my door, and I'm a very religious guy. I keep my Bible open at all times just because I've always been told if your Bible's open, the Lord be with you and he'll protect you through everything. And I look, and my Bible had been closed. I don't have any recollection of closing it, but I could have. So I end up shutting the door and opening my Bible. And the second that happens, I just feel kind of more peace. Like I feel a little bit safer. So I'm like, I chalk it off. I crawl on the bed, and about 5 minutes later, my roommate, his TV across the room turns on unexpectedly. I was like, I know I definitely didn't roll on a remote this time. And I end up calling them, and he's like, dude, that's a brand new television. Like, I don't even have the remote out of the package yet, and there's not batteries in it. And I'm like, you're kidding me. I run out of the room to go knock on my RA's door, and he's not there. So I just go back. I end up passing out, going to sleep. And my buddies come back, and they wake me up, and they're like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, I don't know what happened, but I'm fine. They're like, no, that's not what we're talking about. You're pale white. Like, you look like you're about to die. Like, you look so white. You're probably as white as the whitest beach. And I'm like, I feel okay. And they're like, okay. Well, I end up being fine. I go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning, and I go and I tell my RA what happened. Well, they let me know that about 4 or 5 years previously, the dorm was an all-girls dorm. And about that same time that it was an all-girls dorm, there was a female student who tragically passed away in a car accident. And she was notorious for playing pranks. As this is speaking as a ghost, she was notorious for playing pranks on the men that were staying in that dorm because she was confused of why people were there that shouldn't be there. I didn't really believe them until I went online and looked it up, and the college like newspaper had written an article about a similar experience that happened to a girl about 2 years before me. And the guy that was spending his time there was actually in her room and had a very similar encounter to me that same night that his microwave turned on, and he felt like someone was watching him that entire night.
Yeah. Crazy stuff, man.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. And you get migraines whenever you're experiencing this sort of thing?
Yes. I was diagnosed with them pretty severely to the point that I was hospitalized when I was about 8 years old.
Oh, man.
Every time I have some experience like this, it's always an immediate headache that follows or happens during it.
Do you get migraines or feel kind of wonky or anything around electronics?
Not really. I get them, but I don't get them as often as I used to. They kind of just come out of the blue unless something like an experience happens. I mean, I remember my first ever view was at my grandma's house that we always claim was haunted, but I got one time when a wine bottle fell out of a cabinet unexpectedly. So that's the first migraine I ever remember and the first experience I ever remember, but it seems like every time that I get one, something is either about to happen or something just happened.
And no migraines with the Bigfoot incident?
I wouldn't say a migraine. I would say more of like a kind of just a sense of dread like we talked about, but not really a migraine. Maybe a little bit of sickness, but I wouldn't say a full-blown migraine with that experience.
I'm just asking for research purposes.
Yeah.
Just the researcher brain. One of the things that myself and my friend Robert Dominguez host a Bigfoot club. have talked about, he came up with this realization that a lot of the symptoms that people associate with a Bigfoot sighting, due to the possibility of them using infrasound, are very similar to the symptoms that people feel in the paranormal world whenever they come across high levels of EMF.
Yeah.
The idea that maybe Bigfoot is transmitting some sort of EMF field or something. So that's why I was asking to see if there's any correlation in your case.
Yeah, and that could have been a possibility. Like, I did feel a little sick, but I think it was mostly to nerves and everything. But maybe if that thing stayed around a little bit longer, I might have shown more symptoms. But yeah, these encounters, like the ghost stories happened, ghost encounters, whatever you want to call them, they were probably a 3 to 8 minute sensation. So I don't know if it was too short of a time, but I would say there was definitely some type of sickness that came over, especially me and the guy that ended up seeing whatever we saw that night in at the cabin.
Are you still at that college?
Yeah, I am actually. I'll be a fifth year next year. We've always joked that we want to go back up to the cabin, but I don't think any of us would ever do it. I mean, just after that, and I'm not traumatized because, I mean, we're fairly big dudes. I mean, we're not really scared of much, but I think we are all secretly a little bit shooken up. But yeah, I'm still at the college. Not Maryville College, if that's what you're asking. I'm
Yeah.
at another university now.
Okay.
My bad.
So no desire to have a full-on Bigfoot sighting?
Well, I don't know. I obviously most people have seen the Finding Bigfoot show and everything, but I mean, I don't know. Like, maybe if we could figure out what this creature's intentions are and everything, but I don't know. It just depends. I don't want to go fight for my life against one of these things because I know I'd lose, but I don't know. Maybe if it was a positive outcome, but right now I'd say probably not.
Ethan, thanks for joining me and sharing your stories, man. It was good talking to you. Good to hear from you. And yeah, man, if any future incidents happen, reach out again, man. I'd love to hear about them.
Absolutely, I will. Thank you for letting me come on here and just sharing my experiences in the paranormal world. And with this encounter I had, I hope that maybe someone else reaches out to you that had a similar experience that I did.
Yeah, for sure. And if you've had your own encounter with Bigfoot or something else you can't explain and you'd like to share your story on Bigfoot Crossroads, email me at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to social media, past episodes, merchandise, everything you need, all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.